Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Workplace Equality and Respect webinar. My name is Kelly Nagel, and I am the Policy Advisor for Gender Equality and the Prevention of Violence Against Women here at the Municipal Association of Victoria, the peak body for local government in Victoria. I am joined by Monique Keel, Senior Advisor for Workplace Practice Leadership at Our Watch, our national agency for the prevention of violence against women and their children. I wish to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. We also wish to pay our respects to any Aboriginal people who may be viewing this from other lands around the country. The MAV is really pleased to be partnering with Our Watch in bringing you this webinar and hopes you'll find today's session really helpful in understanding more about the significant cultural change program funded by the Victorian Government. The MAV was keen for this webinar to occur as, in addition to the Victorian and South Australian public services undertaking were, La Trobe University, Carlton and North Melbourne football clubs and Uniting are just some of the agencies currently implementing the standards. In addition, we have 19 councils across Victoria currently doing this work in 2019. A recording of this webinar will be made available as an ongoing online resource and will be accessible online from early next week. And we'll also produce a frequently asked questions document coming out of today. And I'll facilitate these questions today for Monique. And we'll also post this online as an ongoing resource. Finally, we are looking to develop a short, sharp presentation in the coming weeks that we hope will provide guidance for you to facilitate questions and sessions with executives and councillors if you're from a local government. And so we'll keep you informed and let everybody know who's registered today when that becomes available. I'll now move across to field your questions and feedback and hand you over to Monique to share with you a story of what role we can all play in establishing workplaces of equality and respect. Monique.
Thanks, Kelly, and thanks to the MAV for the opportunity to talk about workplace equality and respect today. Today I'll present an overview of workplace equality and respect and the standards, why it's good for workplaces to be engaging in prevention work, and the process that workplaces can undertake to embed equality and respect in their workplaces. Workplace equality and respect is a process for supporting workplaces to assess their organisation and identify key actions to ensure that gender equality and respect are at the centre of their workplace. I'm just moving along.
We did, of course, test this before we came online.
We always begin our presentations with a technological reach.
Here we go.
Thanks. So I'll take you through the slide pack and as Kelly noted, there'll be opportunities for you to ask questions throughout the presentation and then again at the end of the presentation. So I'll be looking across to Kelly to see if she's had any questions coming through. So as this slide notes, workplace equality and respect is at the heart of embedding equality and respect in the workplace. And it addresses the 4 gender drivers of violence against women through actions that focus on equality, respect, and also supporting staff members who might experience violence in the workplace. So really, workplace equality and respect is about gender equality. So whilst we talk about many of the actions that are about discrimination, we really need to always come back and think about how can we embed gender equality for all women across our workplace. I'm going to give a little brief history of how we came to this place with workplace equality and respect. Of course, Our Watch has developed the Change the Story National Shared Framework for the Prevention of Violence Against Women and their Children. That framework came out in 2015 and it outlines what we need to do to address the 4 gender drivers, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. It also outlines what are the key settings in which we need to work to end violence against women, and note that workplaces are one of the key settings in which we can do this work. So with the knowledge that workplaces are a key setting in which to do work to end violence against women and their children, the Victorian government funded a project called the Workplace Equality and Respect Project, which was about using the best evidence that we had, so national evidence and international evidence about what works in workplaces. And that pilot developed the Workplace Equality and Respect Standards, which is a whole of organisational model. It's not just about looking at policies or just about culture. It's looking across the organisation, from the top of the organisation, looking at leadership, down at what work can happen with all staff, but also across the organisation and into the other work that workplaces might do with their stakeholders. So for local government, that would be your clients, your residents, and other stakeholders that local government are engaged with. The Workplace Equality and Respect Standards, there's 5 standards that workplaces need to work towards to achieve equality and respect, and there's a focus on leadership, on strategy, and then on norms and practices. So it's a whole comprehensive look at what actions across workplaces that need to occur in order to say that we're doing prevention of violence against work in workplaces. So the question that we get asked often is why specifically workplaces? Why did Change the Story nominate workplaces as a key setting? And the first reason is that workplaces are influential parts of our lives and communities. Workplaces have huge reach. Many people spend as much time in workplaces as they do with their families or in their communities. So it's an opportunity for us to change attitudes and norms around violence against women and around gender equality. Organisations can be the agents of social change, not just looking at normative change, so changing attitudes, but also structural change and practice change. So workplaces have an opportunity to set a standard that others in the community can follow. So that might be in providing policies, gender equality policies that other organisations, might say sporting clubs, might look to mirror in their own work, but also about changing attitudes that support violence against women. So it's about saying this is where we think attitudes can change, and we will do some work here, and then other parts of the community can follow in that work. So every workplace conversation, every part of your day at work, you have an opportunity to talk about gender equality and talk about respect. And in many conversations, there's also an opportunity to challenge the condoning of violence against women that happens through our workplaces. So workplaces are unique in that there's ways in which we can embed this work through, say, team meetings, through daily conversations, through our communication systems, as well as through just having so day-to-day conversations with colleagues where we can talk about this work. So there's other key reasons why workplaces are great places to do prevention work. So one of the main reasons, and the reason that we often talk about, is that there's significant benefits of doing gender equality work for workplaces. So gender equality is good for workplaces. Having a workplace that's gender equitable brings in talent, it helps to retain staff, it's good for the bottom line of workplaces. So if you look at our Workplace Equality and Respect website, you will see a number of links to research that talks about the benefits of gender equality for workplaces. So another benefit for workplaces is that in doing gender equality work, it enhances the reputation of workplaces. People want to go and work with a workplace that's seen to be gender equitable, as well as people want to give their business to workplaces that are seen to be gender equitable. The next reason that we talk about is that there's an economic benefit for workplaces in preventing violence against women. Violence against women costs employers $1.3 billion a year, approximately. So that if we can end this violence against women, that's actually a great beneficial economic cost to employers, but also that benefit extends to the community and in particular the women and children who are experiencing that violence. Our next point is that employers have a legal responsibility to create safe work environments. So when we think about violence that occurs in the workplaces, employers know that they have a responsibility to make sure that violence doesn't occur. Sometimes that violence occurs between staff or people coming on site to a workplace, but sometimes that violence is family violence that's occurring in the home, but then also comes to work. So workplaces know that they have a legal responsibility to provide workplaces. It's not just about physical safety, it's also about emotional health and well-being of their employees and other people that they work with. So employers have an opportunity to support staff who are experiencing violence that isn't occurring at the workplace. So that's through family violence provisions. This is something which workplaces may not be legally obliged to do, but which is seen to be the right thing to do, and which staff have been telling employers that they are looking to see workplaces stepping up and doing the right thing. It's a human rights issue, violence against women, and employers have an opportunity to create change that leads to improvement at a human rights level for women. So the next part of the talk will be me talking you through the workplace equality and respect standards, and particularly our website. So on the screen you have at the moment a screenshot of the cover of our new website, which was launched a couple of weeks ago, and which we're hoping that you all have an opportunity to go to, maybe multiple times. So the intent of the website is to support you through a journey of organisational change to embed equality and respect at your work. The way that we see workplace equality and respect is that we have the 5 standards, which I'll talk about. We have a process of organisational change, which you'll find under the Taking Action page in our website. And then there's all the tools and resources that we have links to, and also some of them are housed on the website, particularly the workplace equality and respect documents. And these tools and resources will be updated as new resources come online for people. So I've talked a lot about that WER is about equality and respect. I did also want to note that part of the workplace equality and respect standards is about responding to violence against women. So that's responding to when the violence occurs in the website, in the workplace rather, and also when the violence occurs perhaps outside of the workplace, but it is a staff member or a stakeholder who workplaces are in a position to support. So if we look here, we see the WER standards as encompassing sort of 3 elements. Firstly, there's a challenging disrespect, sexism and discrimination. Then there's the normalising and promoting of gender equality. And then the third component is the responding to violence against women. So these 3 things together make up workplace prevention of violence against women. Often when we talk about prevention of violence against women, we're really clear that it's not about the response part of the work, but that we do need to do response each time that we do prevention. Workplace equality and respect makes this very clear. The first 3 standards are clearly about equality and respect. The 4th standard is about support for staff and stakeholders, and the 5th standard is thinking about doing that work externally. So we do recommend that the first part of the work is about making sure you can respond to disclosures and staff members, but always to keep that focus on the equality and respect work. So in order to say we're meeting the standards, we need to be doing all of these things. So I'll take you quickly through the 5 standards. They are commitment, conditions, culture, support and our business. You'll find these standards articulated on our website, and it's really good if you're doing this work to actually get really familiar with what they are. So when you're in the workplace and people ask, well, you know, is doing this particular piece of work prevention, is that going to help us meet the standards? You're familiar with what the standards are about. So the first standard is commitment, which reads that you are committed to preventing violence against women and have structures, strategies and policies that explicitly promote gender equality. So we know from previous work in prevention and work with workplaces that it's really key to get leadership buy-in at the beginning, and to have that buy-in in order to have the right messages passed the whole way through the organisation, but also that leadership buy-in is really key in terms of getting the resourcing, not just to do the current project that you might be doing, but that equality and respect work is embedded in the organisation for the long term. So often workplaces might find they're spending a lot of time at the beginning getting leadership support, talking to leaders, helping them with their messaging so that they have a voice to talk about violence against women and prevention of violence against women. This is really key work to happen at the beginning. The second standard is conditions, and that reads that you embed gender equality in your recruitment, remuneration and promotion processes. Men and women utilise flexible work options without penalty. This standard digs down into the policies and practices that are in your workplace, both around gender equality and respect. So it's turning the focus on what do we need actually to do policy-wise to support any cultural change that we might do. So part of the process that happens throughout workplace equality and respect is to go through policies and work out where policies might need to be improved or promoted or even introduced in the workplace. Standard 3 is about culture, and that reads that all staff feel safe and confident to express themselves. Gender stereotypes, roles and norms are actively challenged in the workplace. Staff can raise concerns about gender inequality and potential discrimination without adverse consequences. The culture standard is one that's often quite tricky for workplaces to get around to doing or to thinking about and implementing, because it's about asking some of the really hard questions at work about what's going on, what are some of the attitudes that people hold, how can we challenge those attitudes in a safe and constructive way. So it's the standard where people tend to manoeuvre out of and want to talk about the other ones, but it's really important because what we know is that you can't have change without cultural change. Structural change won't be embedded and won't stick unless you have the cultural change to support it. So you can have a policy around flexible work and about parents being able to take parental leave, both men and women, but if there's no attitudinal change that says, yes, we support this, leaders talk about supporting it, managers talking about supporting it, then those policies won't be taken up. So standard 3 is really crucial, and it's often the one that people might need a bit more support with. Standard 4 is called support, and that is about that you have structures, practices and culture to ensure an appropriate response to staff and external stakeholders who experience violence, bullying and sexual harassment. So this is the first of the 2 standards that looks both at staff and at stakeholders. So support looks at the ways in which you can support staff who experience violence and also supports stakeholders where appropriate who might experience violence at your workplace or in relation to some of the work that you're doing. So that standard is the one that we say maybe we should have a look at in the initial stages to make sure that people who do come forward throughout this process are adequately supported if they disclose experiencing violence. Standard 5 is core business, and that is that you demonstrate your commitment to gender equality and the prevention of violence against women in all your work and in your interactions with stakeholders. So this standard is about extending the equality and respect work to people that you work with. And this might be in asking that people that you engage with also engage in gender equality work, that they also have a zero tolerance to violence. So it's up to organisations, to workplaces to decide how they might start to extend their reach. So as we noted in the beginning, workplaces have huge reach. Many local councils will have great reach into their community, into community groups, sporting groups, etc. And so this standard talks about how do you engage with those people as well to spread the word and to create cultural and social and systemic change. Kelly, I'm just going to check in. Are there any questions at this point? I've been a bit lax in checking in with you.
I have had one question around influencing senior and executive management to consider and implement culture change.
Okay.
Any insights there?
So there's a few ways in which we know that leaders get engaged in this work. Often we'll find workplaces have started to do this work because there's a story that they've heard. It might be a staff member, it might be a family member that have engaged their interest. And that's one where we're looking to them to understand that violence against women is a really serious and prevalent issue, and then to recognise that they have a role. So if there are conversations about incidences, we can turn that into a conversation about what actually is our role in working to end this. Another way to engage leaders is through data, is through talking about the benefits to workplaces of preventing violence against women and of gender equality. So it's always useful to have data at hand if you're in conversations, to make sure you know what the benefits are and that you're ready to talk about them. Other leaders are engaged through interactions with other community members. So we look to influence leaders through having forums or speaking opportunities where there are other people who are engaged in this work and talk about the work that they're already doing. Anything else? No. So I'm going to now just talk a little bit more about the standards and then move into the process. So on your slide now, you'll have a snapshot of Standard 1 and what it talks about. And you'll see it talks about the different elements, so leadership, strategy, and norms and practices. Each of the standards is broken down into elements, and then it's broken down further in the document into actions that you can take in order to meet that standard related to each element. So the standard's really clear on what needs to happen. Having said that, it's not prescriptive. There might be many other actions that workplaces can take that relate back to each of the elements and each of the standards, but it does give you a guide, and it does give a lot of material that you can think about. Maybe we need to take this action, maybe there's other actions we can take as well. The next page in the standard documents gives some information on why it matters and what does it take. So these are useful if you're doing your work with leaders or you're having conversations about why you're implementing workplace equality and respect, to look back and have some words at hand about why it matters to be doing this work. Why does it matter that we have flexible work in our workplaces? Why does it matter that we have a zero tolerance to violence? And then what does it take? What does it look like? What are we going to need to do to actually achieve this?
Monique, I might actually ask you a couple of questions if you
Sure.
don't mind. With the implementation process, step 1 talks about introducing training. Does this need to occur before the deployment of staff surveys and things like that?
Okay, so what we recommend is that there needs to be key people in the organisation, and that's generally people at a management level and maybe HR, depends on the way your workplace is structured, who are able to respond. So that's the first bit that we recommend happens. So if people, the minute you start talking about violence against women and even prevention, even if you're talking about gender equality and you're making the link to how gender equality or inequality drives violence against women, there will be disclosures and there will be people who will need someone to talk with. So the first bit of training we recommend is the response training, if that hasn't occurred in your workplace, to make sure that people know who to talk to and where to seek help. And that might also involve making sure that people know who that person is. So it's, you know, it's not enough that people are trained. Everyone in the org needs to know that that's the person or these are the people to go to. We would recommend that all managers, people who manage staff, have that training. But if that's not possible, then we would at least recommend that it's clear to staff members who they should talk to. The other bit of training that's key at the beginning is training about prevention of violence against women and making the link between gender inequality and violence against women. So that leadership training around what is prevention, why are we doing gender equality in the workplace, what is our role, that also should occur towards the beginning of the project. But that's not as crucial before your survey goes out. Of course, people then might ask questions that leaders aren't ready to answer. So we would say to implement both those types of training right at the beginning. And the leadership training might be, first of all, with the implementation team, the people running the project, as well as other managers and leaders. It's really key that senior leaders understand this work and why it's being rolled out in the workplace, because they are the people that might get the questions. So once you've done that training, then I think it's okay to start sending out surveys. Of course, it depends what you're asking in your survey. If you're particularly asking about experiences of violence, then it's very important that that training has happened. If you're only asking about gender equality, say in your workplace survey, then then the response training is still needed, but not as crucial that enough people have it. It really is about a process of looking at the organisation, looking at what structures you already have, where do you need to maybe improve that response system before you start rolling this work out across all staff.
And can I just follow up? So we've got a question here around various levels of buy-in. So how do we engage, what would you recommend engaging and incorporating councillors in this process who sort of sit above the actual organisational side of local government?
So councillors are also people who will be talking to community members regularly about this work. So it's important that they're briefed. It's of course up to the council officers on the detail and how much they're briefed. There might be some councillors who are willing to champion this and might want to have extra training. It's engaging councillors. I know their time's really busy and they're often part-time, and engaging them and finding the time to sit down with them and talk through the link between gender inequality and violence against women might be difficult. So maybe to have some key points, some key talking points for them to make sure that they know you're available, to offer to do speaking notes if that's needed for events. Of course, the council staff, I'm sure, are the experts in prepping councillors for this work.
We've also got a question around getting buy-in and advocacy to the HR areas of council, and to ensure that there's a gendered focus, and the focus is on work as a legitimate and important piece of work in its own right, rather than part of a general workplace approach to respect, like is in bullying or racism. Any advice in terms of the advocacy there at the HR area of council?
Our experience is that HR is often very engaged in this and see it as part of their role. Sometimes the sticking point is that HR haven't had time, or no one's done the gendered work with them. So talking about the benefits to the workplace and to the staff well-being in terms of doing this work is useful, because HR also not just organising recruitment, but also dealing with issues when they're not going so well with staff. So talking to HR about the benefits to the whole organisation and their area of work. I don't know of anyone who's specifically done any leadership messages on for HR staff, but I'm happy to pass that through if I do find anyone who has.
Thank you.
Any more?
Okay, great.
I'm just moving this along, or maybe. Yep. Move. Beautiful. So I'm going to take you through the steps. I've started talking a little bit about the training. The Workplace Equality and Respect website has a page called Taking Action, which walks you through the steps that you need to take. So the first thing to note is that the Workplace Equality and Respect is a flexible and adaptive piece of work. So it wasn't designed to be something that was done in sort of a tick-the-box order. It was designed to recognise where workplaces are already doing gender equality or respect work, or doing work to have a zero tolerance to violence, and actually saying, look at the work that you're doing and see where you can actually do other work to improve equality and respect. Having said that, there are some key steps that I've mentioned a couple of already that we do recommend you start with in order to get off to a good start. So the first of all is to identify staff to lead the work. And what we recommend is that you have staff from across the organisation, and also at different levels. People at different levels of the organisation have a different perspective on how gender inequality is being enacted in the workplace. So it's good for key staff doing this work, plus leaders, plus anyone who'd be quite involved in the work, to understand violence against women and how to prevent it. So that's understanding what the standards are about, understanding the 4 gender drivers of violence against women, and how gender inequality is the key driver, and that all this work that we do to prevent violence against women needs to have a focus on gender. Of course, the workplace equality and respect standards do talk about gender, so it is a gendered piece of work, but we do recognise that gender always intersects with other forms of discrimination as well. And throughout the coming year, we will be including more resources on the website that talk about how to take this intersectional approach to adopting the WER standards. So when you're thinking about sort of how gender discrimination might be being enacted at work, also thinking about how other forms of discrimination might be happening at the same time or intersecting and impacting on staff as well. So the third piece of work is to secure a genuine commitment from leaders, which we've talked about. That's really important, and often leaders might say, yes, I do this, I talk at a lunch or I turn up on International Women's Day. The securing genuine commitment from leaders can be a sort of a journey that the leaders go on. It does take time to understand the link between gender inequality and violence against women. So it's something that they might come back to and need more information on over the course of the work. And then the fourth bit of the initial part is to ensure that workplaces can respond to staff who experience violence. And so that's looking at Standard 4 and seeing whether there's any actions that need to be taken right at the beginning. The next steps are about doing some work to find out what's going on. So many workplaces will have a staff survey, some won't. We recommend doing a staff survey that covers gender inequality and discrimination, as well as disrespect and harassment, to get a sense of what's happening, what staff are reporting, what the culture is at the workplace. There is a sample survey on the website which you can adapt and change. In our intersectionality practice guidance, there's an expanded survey which asks not just about gender inequality, but other forms of inequality and discrimination, which you're also welcome to adapt. The next steps part of the project, I apologise, my screen's gone blank, includes, I'll just go to my page here. So it includes then, first of all, doing a survey, also consulting more broadly. There might be other people in the workplace who want to talk about their experience that is not part of the process. So it might be talking to HR about what's going to happen in this, as part of this work that might impact on your workload. So consult about how this work is going to impact on different teams and their work. And then it's about doing a self-assessment. So the self-assessment is a tool that's been designed to facilitate a sort of an in-depth discussion with key people in the organisation about what actions to take. So once you've pulled together your survey data, you've done your consultations, and another key part is to collect data about gender equality, what it looks like in your workplace, who's taking flexible leave, are both men and women taking up parental leave, is that promoted to people? So getting some of that gender data and then coming together and having a discussion, looking at the data, looking at what our staff is telling us, looking at what the concerns are across the workplace, and then devising an action plan and steps to take. We recommend that that action plan is then revised every year. So there might be a long-term strategy of embedding equality and respect, and then every year a new action plan to look at how did we track this year. Maybe we've done some work on this area, but maybe now we need to focus on another area. Another key tool that is available and to use to get data is the Key Progress Indicators document, which talks you through mapping your gendered data against the 8 indicators. So it's things like, what's your ratio of men and women in leadership? Is there a gender pay gap? So some key data, so if you bring that data along, so the gender data with the workplace survey and other information, and that puts you in a really good position to start to understand where you can take action in the workplace. So on your screen now you have a selection of the documents that I've just talked about. There's the standards document which tells you, talk through the 5 standards and how you can work to meet them. There's the implementation guide which talks through those steps that I've just touched on. Self-assessment tools, start survey, the gender equality indicators, and the final one at the bottom right is the practice guidance. There's 12 practice guidance documents which will assist you in thinking about policies, about communications, how to deal with backlash, how to do this work in a rural or remote or regional setting, how to deal with perpetrators, how to respond to disclosure. So there's a whole list of documents that you can go to support you in doing this work. On our website, there's also a whole lot of external documents that have been produced by other organisations to assist you with this work. So there's a number of big health documents around backlash, equal footing leadership documents, and other documents from other organisations. And we will be updating that list of documents, or their links to other documents, as new documents are made available and new tools and resources. Kelly, any more questions?
Yep, a couple more. The standards talk in quite binary terms around men and women. And can you provide any advice on how we could use more inclusive language?
Yes, so the standards do use very binary language. That's a tension that we're still in the process of resolving. We're on a journey of understanding how to talk about using non-binary terms. So what we do acknowledge is that, of course, not all people identify as either a man or a woman, and that the language we use is therefore not inclusive of everyone and how they identify and how they want to be seen in the word resources. The reason we do use the terms man and woman and violence against women is in recognition that there is a gendered nature to violence against women, and that we do need to focus on gender in order to end violence against women. This was clear in the research that came together to produce Change the Story. We do acknowledge that therefore people will not be able to see themselves in this document. We're working towards understanding how we can change the language to be more inclusive. We don't want people to feel like this isn't for them, because actually we want violence against everyone, and particularly we want people who don't identify in a binary way to feel included in this work. So we will be continuing to update the documents and to begin to use more inclusive language over the coming year.
And another question related around whether the implementation guide's being revised.
In what sense particularly? Around the binary language?
Perhaps I would suggest, yeah.
Yeah, so all of the documents will be revised over time to be more inclusive. And if anybody, as part of this work, produces some documents which they see as leading work on using gender inclusive language, we'd love to see them too, and we can either share them on the website or begin to integrate them into the WER standards.
And there was one other question around whether there was any intention for the WER standards to become accredited.
At the moment, there's no intention for them to be accredited. It wasn't part of the original process that was undergone. What we had heard from workplaces is that they want a flexible and adaptive tool, because a lot of the people who were interested in undertaking workplace prevention of violence against women had actually begun doing gender equality or violence prevention work. So they were looking for a tool that would complement the work that they were already doing. The other reason that it's not going to be accredited is that having an accreditation system costs money, and we do not want people to have to pay to be able to access all these tools and resources. So currently it's free on our website. All the documents are able to be downloaded and used freely by anyone who chooses, and currently that's how we would like them to remain. We don't want smaller orgs, community orgs, to feel that cost is prohibitive to them doing this work.
Two more questions. And would you suggest councillors are included in the survey and audit?
I think that councillors should be included. They're key people in a municipal government, and their opinion's really valuable.
Great, thank you. And just in terms of the training that is associated with the WER standards, when is that likely to be available for delivery?
The training is being revised at the moment, and then we're working through a process of accrediting trainers who will be able to work with workplaces to do this work, and we'll let MAV know when that's finalised. So you'll be able to talk to Kelly or send an email through and find out who can assist with the delivery of the training. The training won't be actually on the website, but there will be trainers available who have access to all the training tools.
And how will they go about finding out who the trainers are?
There is a training page with a link on the website currently. If they're part of the MAV project, then I would recommend talking to Kelly. And otherwise, we will have that up on our website when it's finalised.
Okay. Next slide. Next slide.
Sorry?
Next slide.
Oh, I think that's the end.
Yep.
Another, oh, there is another slide. Thanks, Kelly. So, as Kelly mentioned in the beginning, there will be a FAQ document produced at the end of today to answer your questions so that you can all have a look. There's the link on the screen to the Workplace Equality and Respect website and Kelly's email as well.
Okay. Thank you, Monique, very, very much. And thank you to everyone online for participating today. Really great to have such interest at such short notice, and I know you're very busy people. So early next week, we'll put this recording online and also the FAQ document that we've just talked about, and including the questions that came through on Zoom and via email. We'll also look for some resources perhaps around some key messages for HR areas for big engagement. And we'll also let you know when we'll send a separate email when the short, sharp presentation is ready for distribution. So next week we'll send you an email with a link to a little feedback survey from today as well. But yeah, very much appreciate you making the time to come and do this today.
Thanks, Kelly.
All right. I think we're over and out, folks.